Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to our webinar today for our Lunch and Learn. And we've got 2026 coming up. And here we are in the middle of November. Before we know it, it's going to be the big red man in the big red suit is going to be coming down the chimney. And of course, what we're going to experience is a whole new year. So I felt that this would be a really good webinar to get everyone started and help everyone with some insights and some understandings so that you can get the most out of this particular year. Now, before I begin, I'm going to put into the chat, I've got a little bit of a gift there for you. So it actually, in the chat, there's a link there, and in the link, that actually gives you the opportunity to download the workbook, both in a Word format and a PDF format, and also three audios, three hypnotic transformational audios that I've put there as a gift for you as well. So feel free to hit that link and then download all those resources for you. So hopefully everybody can hear me now. Now, I'm not sure whether you guys actually have the chat. If you can actually hear me, can you just pop a yes in the chat or the Q's and A's? And so that I can see that people, oh, beautiful. Okay, awesome. Everyone can hear. Excellent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin by sharing my screen, and I'm going to open up some slides for you. So here we go. And so the intent and the purpose for today is how can NLP or neuro-linguistic programming help improve my life? So let's start with some really good goal getting. Now, the thing that we have to understand about goals is that a lot of people understand goals as SMART goals. And of course, there's, 7 keys to a successful outcome in NLP and helping people to achieve their goals. Though one thing that I've certainly learned after 24 years of coaching, it's also goal getting isn't so much about the steps, but often one of the really key big elements is what do you take out? What do you get rid of in order to really help your goals to achieve? So what we're going to be talking about is adding to your 2026 by actually taking away. And ADD is a mnemonic device or an acronym, and I'll explain what that's about just in a moment. But before we do, for those of you who I've never met before, my name is Rick Schnabel. Now, in 2002, I studied coaching and then went on to learn NLP, EFT, metaphysics, clean language, reset, and a whole host of lots of various insights around transformation. And a lot of my work and my study was very, very much centered on how do you actually get to a point where you can remove things that are in your way. I'm a brain untrainer. That's essentially what most people come to me for, to find the thing that's really stopping them or blocking them. And only today, for example, I was working with a trader who is doing, share trading. He's doing absolutely everything right. He's trained with the best in the world, Louise Bedford. So he's got all of the systems, the structures, everything, but there's something blocking him and stopping him from trading really well. So brain untraining is very much what I do. So to date, I've completed 39,000 hours of transformational work. I've won the APAC award twice in 2023 and 2024. It's an international award for transformational coaching. And I've now authored 7 best-selling books, and my most recent was the official and fully accredited life coach and NLP practitioner book. I've actually got a copy here. It's a monster. It's an absolutely huge book. It's a book that essentially we gave to our students of our life coaching and NLP practitioner training. And we decided to add a whole lot more to it. So it went from about 330 pages to 550 pages. So it's the biggest transformational book in the world currently. And my next book is going to be the master's version, and it's going to be even bigger than that. So look out for that. So today, what we're actually looking at is I'm going to introduce you to my ADD formula, my AD formula, that's helped many of my clients achieve their goals. And that part of that formula is learning how to identify blocks in your life, in your business, in your career. And to know how to do that, we've got to go to a particular word called metacognition. But what does that word mean? That means understanding the thoughts underneath the thinking that is really creating the outcomes. And this is the big work. This is the work that makes all the difference. When you can find out what is a block that has been stopping you for years, and you know how to remove that block, then all of a sudden the world can open in incredible ways. Now, back in 2004, I removed a block which was really my poverty patterns. It kept me stuck on a very low income, and it kept me there for years. And when I studied neuro-linguistic programming, I discovered the metacognition as to what was the thinking underneath the thinking. And all of a sudden, my annual income turned into my monthly income. So it can have really big opportunities for shift when you really start to get a sense of what is underneath your thinking. So today we're going to actually, this is more of a workshop in that I am going to get you to do some things, and hence that's why I've put the link to the workbook. And the idea here is to actually do some exercises to help you to get some understanding as to what are some of the things that are really stopping you or slowing you down. Now, for those of you that really have been able to put things together in a very cognitive way, you know that ADD actually stands for accept, decide, and detach. And this is a formula that I'm going to be focusing a lot of our efforts on today. So the workbook is there to follow along and help you to deepen your understanding. You will see some areas that are blanks. And in the PowerPoint, I've made sure that we've put red around the fonts so you can see what are the words that need to go into your workbook if you want to begin to follow along. And that's a good way to really get deeper understanding. So before we begin, I'm going to start off by giving you a gift. That link that I gave you in the chat, you might also realize that it's a transfer now link. So in other words, you can download some things. I have put 3 audios in there. The audios that I've given you are Destiny Beyond Limits, which is a really good audio to be able to discover what are your limits, what are some of the things that you have put as blocks in your destiny, in your path. And so that really helps you to understand what could be your destiny, what could be your purpose in life. Confidence Beyond Limits is to help to boost your confidence, and really good to listen to before you've got a presentation or something along that line. A richer way to think is to begin to expand your thinking so that more opportunities can start coming into your world. So they're the gifts for you, and just simply download them using that particular link and collect your 3 audios and your workbook if you haven't already. So let's get started. The process of achieving a goal, if you think about it, should be really easy. It should be essentially about creating a dream that is ideal or something that you really desire. And the next step would be to design a strategy in order to achieve that dream. And the final piece is as simple as do the work. Do whatever you have to do in order to get that happening. But the real question, is it that simple? And something that I've certainly found over the years is it's not that simple. And I want to explain the very reason why people can't achieve the things that they, do vision boards for, or create strategies for, and start doing the work to actually achieve. One of the hidden blocks essentially is in mindset. Because if goal getting is just three simple steps, why doesn't everybody achieve their actual goals? And I really want to address that today. So I'm going to start off with Half T. Ecker's quote. And here is our first little piece in red. So if you've got your workbook there, you will see that there's a question there that says, "My inner world creates my outer world." That's the quote, of course. And the question is, what is that missing word? The missing word is inner, your inner world. Now, if we look at this and we start to look at Joe Dispenza, he says your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. He's saying exactly the same thing, but in reverse. But it means the same thing. Your inner world creates your outer reality. Now, this is nothing new. Many of you know exactly this. And you might even go back to King Solomon, who said, "As man thinketh, so is he. As you, man and woman, thinketh, so are you." So this is nothing new. But the point that I'm really making here is the process of achieving a goal, the dream, design, and do, actually has another element to it. And that element is identity. So that's where my ADD formula really kicks in. Identity at the end of the day really conforms to who you think you are, that is your identity. It actually will determine what you will and also what you won't do. So it's really important to understand that your identity is linked to your behaviors. And if you've been frustrated, with trying to increase your income or improve your health or create more dreams, desires in your world, but they're not happening for any particular reason, you're in the right place, because that's exactly what we're going to be addressing today. So if these come from the number one, and I'm going to give you the number two reason that most people don't achieve their goals. The number two reason is they think about how their life could be better, but they don't know what to do about it. So this really is skill. It's really about skill and strategy. It's because a person, thinks about a better life, but they actually don't have the skill to be able to achieve the behaviors, the do, and they don't have a strategy in order to achieve it. That's the number two reason that most people don't achieve their goals. The number one reason I'll come to in a minute, but before I get into that, here is a thing that people get stuck in. I believe that the 21st century's greatest disease is a thing that I call thinkivity. What does that really mean? It's a noun where it really should be a verb, but it's a noun, and that is the illusion that thinking is always a productive activity. Now, something that I've found, certainly as a brain untrainer and coach, is many people get too caught up in thinking. And if you think about it, it's something that we're all taught to do. Come on, think about it, work it out, basically process, what do you need to do? And everyone gets caught in the actual thinking. But people often confuse thinking with doing, and hence thinkivity. The number one reason that people get stuck is because of this phrase, and I hear this phrase so often in coaching. I'll be working with a person and I'll be saying, what is it that you're trying to achieve? And we establish what that is. And then I'll ask this question, what is actually stopping you from achieving it? And the common answer I often get is something stopping me, and I don't know what it is. And if I can come back to the trader that I was working with only today, he's doing everything right. He's got all his systems, all his structure, all his rules. He's got everything to do trading right. And by looks of it, he is doing absolutely everything right. But the fascinating thing that we revealed today is he has a belief system, and that belief system is he believes that his bank account is just going to keep going down, 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 down. Guess what? His bank account is going down, 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 down. Now, you might be saying, well, that's evidence. That's proof. that he's not achieving what he really wants to achieve. And yes, it is proof, but does belief come before proof, or does proof come after belief? So the thing that we have to understand here is what is actually missing is metacognition, understanding the thinking underneath the thinking that's causing the behavior, the outcomes. So what I want to talk about today is what you must take away to really add to your outcomes, to add to your life and where you want to go. Now, this particular photo is taken at one of my most favorite surfing spots. And about 2012, I had this dream, and this dream was that I wanted to get another property and I wanted to buy this particular property near the beach, in a beautiful location. But what I had to do really came down to my ADD formula. So what I had to do was I had to accept what is true. I had to accept the good and the bad that was happening in relation to my goal. Now, back around this time, before this time, we had the GFC. And the GFC was a horrible time if you can recall what it was like, particularly if you're in business. And what was happening was people just weren't spending. It was a lack of faith in what was going on in the world at the time. And so, as a result of this, to actually achieve this particular goal, we had to hit some financial marks in order to achieve this goal. And so, I had to accept that what was true was we were in a not a good financial place. The GFC had happened. So, I had to accept that. So, my next point was I had to decide what I wanted instead. And what I decided that I wanted instead was I wanted better financial results than we were getting at the time. But the most important part was I had to detach from what was not helpful. The thing that we have to recognize as human beings is we have senses, our sight, smell, taste, touch, feel. All of our senses determine our reality. So if I looked from my senses, I could see the evidence, and the evidence was that we weren't making the money to be able to make this dream come true. So what I had to do was I had to go to my coach, because it's actually quite hard to have metacognition of your own beliefs, your own values, your own meta programs, your own patterns that create problems in your life. So I worked with my own coach and began to realize that I had really bought into the GFC because there was a lot of media at the time, a lot of negativity, and I was buying into that. And as a result, my behaviors changed. And he said to me a really important thing. He said, surely there are still people who are needing your help, but you just haven't found them yet. And I thought about that and I thought, well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, there are people who definitely need my help and just haven't found me yet. And he said, those people also have a bank account, have money, have investments, have things that they can draw upon. Like the GFC really affected a lot of businesses, but if you're in a job, it's not really a problem. You still got a job. And so that began to make sense to me. And so he coached me on that. And then all of a sudden, our results completely changed. We started getting a lot more results in our business. And I can remember I put up on my filing cabinet, I put 300 boxes. So every time someone came into our life coach and NLP practitioner program, I put a cross on those boxes. So his coaching said, how can you get more crosses on those boxes? And so he coached me to get more crosses on those boxes, and then voila. Hence, this is where I'm talking to you from now. Not that beach, but that beach is just over there. So the thing that we have to do in order to really begin to achieve is we're going to accept what is true, what is good and what is bad, what is helping us, what is hindering us. Decide what we really want instead of what the results are showing us, and detach from what is not helping us. So the first piece, accept. So we can fully understand this. The first thing that we have to do is stop expecting and start accepting. Because frustration is when we expect better results than what we're achieving right now, but we must accept what is real and what is true. But truth is, instead of accepting a bad situation, this is what most people do. Most people bury their head in the sand. So, instead of getting busy on fixing problems and so forth, what they do is they bury their head in the sand and pretend it's not bad, or pretend that just by doing, that somehow magically you're going to get the results that you really, really want. So, how do I know this is true? Well, let's look at this statistically. Statistically, 65% of divorces are caused by a failure to communicate, and people stay in their relationship usually 2 years past the point that they believe it's over. In other words, people keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. And we all know that's the definition of insanity. So the thing that we have to understand here is that that's a big percentage. 65% is a big percentage. Let me show you another big percentage. 68% of people avoid situations due to not coping with emotional responses, such as anxiety and fear. So in other words, what happens is people get fearful or anxious about their future, and as a result, they don't actually do anything. They, in fact, avoid the situations that they really should be focusing on. Here's another one. 85% of employees globally stay in roles that they hate. So, in other words, these are all examples of people who are stuck. They actually are not working on the final D, the detach, nor are they accepting what is real. They just keep doing the same old thing. So here's another. 81% of people avoid discussing their finances. In fact, this is based in the UK actually. 1 in 6 adults don't actually even have savings. So again, these are people who are avoiding what they really should be focusing on, what they really should be calling out to their coach and saying, hey, coach me on this. I don't want to be a statistic. So the thing that we've got to understand, from little things, big things come, as the song goes. So the thing that we've got to really accept is accept that if you drink a few beers each night and don't exercise, by the end of that year, your body shape might, in fact, change. So the thing that we've got to accept is that if we're doing a behavior, even in small amounts, it's really going to add up. And as we approach 2006, 2026, I should say, what you really want to be able to do is what can I do in a small way that can actually make a really, really big difference in my year and make a better year. So another thing to think about is we also have to accept that the more television that you actually watch, statistically, the less income you will earn. I mean, some people don't even realize how much TV they're watching. And while you're watching TV, you don't get healthier, you don't get wealthier, you don't get more of anything other than more entertainment. And in some cases, if you're watching the news and current affair, you get a lot more negative data going into your brain. So therefore, statistically, the more TV you watch, the less income you earn. So the thing that we've got to do is accept what is happening. So a good tool to help to really get us to accept what is happening is a tool that is known as the Wheel of Life. So basically, the Wheel of Life has a number of subjects, business and career, finances, spiritual, family, friends, romance, personal growth, fun, recreation, health, and fitness in this context. But a wheel of life really could have anything. Like when I'm wealth coaching people, I have a wealth coach or wealthing wheel of life, which has different categories on it. There's also in the area of health, you would have a health wheel of life, again, with different categories on it. So, what you can do in your workbook, what you can actually do is without thinking, the best way to do a wheel of life is don't think about it too much. In fact, give yourself about 1 second on each of these categories and categorize yourself in the context of what you would categorize as 10 means you've totally nailed it. It's perfect. There's nothing more to do there. You're doing really, really well. All your systems, all your structure, everything you have is great. So if you're at 0, then it's terrible. It's absolutely horrendous. So chances are you're not at 10 and chances are you're not at 0. So the thing to do here is just make a mark and go, this is where I am in my business and career. And if you're not a 10, of course, it would be smaller than that. It would be lower than that. So go ahead now, open up your workbook and give yourself a category in each of these areas. Of course, don't copy this one. This is just as an example. So, what you do is if your finances aren't exactly a 10, but they're not a 9 either, they're a little bit below, then mark it there. If your health and fitness is not good, then maybe it's at the 5 mark or the 6 or the 7 or the 8 or the 9 or the 10 or less. So give yourself a category in each one of these areas. So what you will find, and again, this is just an example, what you will see here, if this was your wheel of life, then the area in which you need to accept more is what are you doing to get the low results in your area of family and friends? Or what are you doing to get the low results in your health and fitness? And of course, we know that if we don't do the work in our health, eventually we're going to pay the price. If we don't do the work in our business and career, eventually we're going to pay the price. So accepting is really about now focusing in on an area that is really important to you, but it's not showing up so well in your life. So the wheel of life is what I put in the workbook. So you can now mark yourself in your wheel of life. And if you do it really quickly, you're going to get more of an unconscious response rather than thinking about it too much. So what you really want is more of an unconscious response. You want a truthful, real response. So in this case, this person is suffering in their health and fitness and their family and friends. So that's where you would do the work and focus in that particular area. Now, of course, what I've also done in the document, I have put a lot more questions. So basically, in your actual manual, your workbook for today, there are some questions that I've put there. And the questions that I've put there are for you to get really good awareness. And the areas that I've put is what do you need to accept in the area of your business or life? And, so there is a point there on page 8 where you can write down any areas that you really need to focus in on. But there are also some questions. It says, are my wealth beliefs blocking me? And there are questions there to answer. Do I believe I've got what it takes to be wealthy? Do I believe I will be or I am wealthy? Do I believe I'm not smart enough to be wealthy? Do I believe I'm too lazy to be wealthy? Do I believe I'm not lucky enough to be wealthy? So they're all questions to answer quite simply with a yes or no. Yes, I believe that. No, I don't believe that. And so this workbook, I'm encouraging you after today to go a little bit deeper into this and really get some metacognition of what are the areas that you really need to focus on to make a difference in 2026. Let's be honest. If you keep doing what you're doing and you're getting all of the results from everything that you've done and what you are doing on a repetition, if you want a different outcome, for instance, in the wheel of life in your health or fitness, then you've got to be able to get real. You've got to accept what you're not doing and then make a difference. A couple of days ago, I was working with a gentleman who has put on a lot of weight, is not very fit, not very healthy. And we discovered as we were coaching, the reason that he's putting on weight is because he came out of a very messy divorce. Unconsciously, he is aiming to be as unattractive as possible so that he avoids getting into another relationship and having another terrible divorce. So once he got that, although that doesn't sound great, once he got that, he began to realize that, wow, I've got to do the work there. And we immediately got stuck into the work there. Now he's got a full health program to get his fitness and his weight down and get him back to where he needs to be because we did the work on removing all of the trauma around the divorce. So I hope this makes sense. So let's do a quick exercise. So what I'd like you to do is go to page 8 in your workbook and write down the very first thing that springs to mind when you think about what needs to change in 2026. And hopefully you did the wheel of life as well, so you know the answer. So I'm not going to give you too long on this. I'm just going to give you a few seconds to write down what is the first thing that springs to mind when you think of what needs to change in 2026. What needs to change? What are you going to focus on? What do you need to improve? What are you unhappy with? Or what have you been unhappy with this year? What is something that you really want to make a difference on? So that's the very first exercise. So let's jump into the next piece, which is decide. So the thing that we have to understand about decisions is nothing truly happens until we make a full-hearted decision. Now, a lot of people, when I talk about thinkivity, a lot of people think they're making decisions by thinking, but they're not. A full-hearted decision is when you draw a line in the sand, you say, no more, I'm not doing that anymore. Or you say, I'm going to do this, and this is what I'm going to do. And then you get busy on, doing it or building a strategy or whatever you need to do in order to make it real. So I want to create a distinction here. Decisions are not what most people think decisions are. So a real decision is is literally when you write it down and you say, I am now going to do this. So I don't believe that you've really made a decision until you've actually cognitively sat down and thought about it and then written it down. So once you make a decision, the universe conspires to make it happen, according to Ralph Waldo Emerson, and I totally agree. I don't know about you, but I've certainly seen this in my life. When I've made a decision about something, all of a sudden, this conversation happens out of nowhere that relates to the decision that I've made. Or someone says, hey, have you seen this book? Or have you seen this course? Or, hey, look at this post. And all of a sudden, your reticular activating system, which is your system of deletions and distortions, and generalizations opens up and you begin to see something that you think, oh, wow, that relates totally to my decision. Or have you found that the next thing that you think you should be doing or could be doing all of a sudden begins to happen? Can anyone relate to this? Can anyone relate to this? Oh, I've just noticed that there's a few people that are saying, where is the link? And the link is in my very first piece in the post in the chat. So if you go right down the bottom, you'll see a little chat, looks like a speech bubble. Click on that, and then that will open up the chat dialogue, and you will actually see the link there. Now, can anyone relate to this? You know, when you've made a decision that all of a sudden synchronicity seems to happen and opportunities open up. Just put a yes or a no if that has never ever happened to you. So, okay, I'm going to move on. Yes, Gemma says yes. Kate says yes. Or seldom, Don says. Trudy says yes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is move on to the next piece. Now, the next piece that I want to introduce to you is what is called the emotional frequency scale. Now, this is a model that came from David R. Hawkins, Dr. David R. Hawkins, and he created this model which basically started to measure frequency based on emotion. So, in other words, shame is a very low emotion at 20 hertz, whereas guilt is a little bit higher, but it's at 30 hertz. And then we get to anger, which is much higher at 150 hertz because it's quite an intense energy. And then we've got, neutrality, which is at 250 hertz. That's when the game begins. So, in essence, when we're moving forward with anything that we're doing in our life, what we essentially want to begin to do is get our emotion up, get our frequency up. Now we're starting to move into Ralph Waldo Emerson's world, which basically when he comes out with that previous quote that I just shared, when you make a decision, the universe conspires for your success is another way to frame it. So when your emotion begins to increase, so do the opportunities that come to you. So the thing that we have to understand is that how you feel predicts what you think. And the reason this is important is because all thoughts are state derived. In other words, when you decide what you want, the thing to think about is how do you want to feel? How do you want to feel when you achieve that particular thing that you want to get? Now, I also put in the document, in the workbook, I also put a thing in NLP, we call it a transderivational search. It's a process, a script, essentially, we ask ourselves to bring about an emotional state. So, how you are feeling determines pretty much what you are creating. And it's a really important piece. So, whenever you see a successful business, someone once made a courageous decision. And what we want to be able to do is we want to get our emotional state up at least into a state of courage so that we can begin to do the hard work, so that we can begin to move forward. And the next thing to know is when you make a decision, people who write down their goals are 42% more likely to achieve them compared to people who don't. So the thing that we want to do is when we've decided what we want is we want to actually write it down. So here is another quick exercise. So what I'd like you to do is go to page 14 in your workbook and write down the first thing that springs to mind when you think of what is a key goal that you want to achieve in 2026. What is something that you truly want to create, manifest, bring about in 2026? So go ahead on page 14 and write that down. What is it that you really want to create? So get what is unconscious. Get what is something that you really feel you need or want and write that down. So I'm not going to give you too long on this particular exercise. I want your unconscious results to come out. So I'll give you just a little bit more time. What's something you want? What does your heart desire? write it simply, and later on you can elaborate on it. Okay. Now, the most important piece in the ADD formula is the detach piece. Because unconscious trauma and pain drives most people until we detach from that trauma or those beliefs or those patterns that keep perpetuating the same things in our lives. So, most people would like to project a professional image that's a little bit like this. And most of us want to appear like we're successful, we're healthy, we're strong, we're confident, all of those sorts of things. Though the truth is that in reality, in our quiet moments alone, we have sometimes moments like that, where it feels like nothing's working, nothing's really moving in our way, our direction. Equally, it could look like that. So, how do we actually locate the cause? How can we find the actual cause of this? And the thing to think about here, and here's my initial disclaimer, and that is knowing the source of one's problems really requires one of three things. It requires brilliant metacognition, and for those of you who are trained in NLP and certainly those who have gone on to masters will know how to find out what is the thinking underneath the thinking. So if you're not trained at that particular level, then what you'll need is a brilliant coach, someone who can really ask you the questions and find out what is it that is stopping you from moving forward. The third thing is that you'll need a moment of brilliance. In other words, we call that an aha, an aha moment where you go, yes, yes, I've worked it out. I've worked out what is really stopping me. Because 95% of thought, emotion, and learning occur in the unconscious mind without our awareness, according to Gerald Zaltman, who's a Harvard professor. And it's true. A large majority of the stuff that really gets us stuck and limited is unconscious. It's not actually conscious. If you ask a person what is stopping you from achieving this, most people really won't actually be able to give you an answer. So here is some examples. So if you were, and this is something that I've seen numerous times in coaching, quite often in coaching, we're going back to, when you were 7 years old or, 10 years old or even 5 or 4 years old. Because if you were punished for speaking up in class, particularly if it was a trauma, what you might be doing is punishing yourself today every time you have to speak up or every time you have to put yourself forward. This is an example of metacognition. It's understanding that our early behaviors, stuff that happened very early in our lives, can still be affecting us today. Another example of this is if people were told as kids, don't talk to strangers, don't talk to strangers, don't talk to strangers. That keeps a child safe as they're growing up. However, it might be the very reason that you fear speaking to strangers. Like if your job requires making cold calls or going into meetings, meeting people that you don't even know, no wonder you feel a sense of anxiety or fear because that has been instilled in you from a very, very young age where you've been told again and again and again, don't talk to strangers. Another example of this, and I'll explain a little case history in a moment too that really reinforces some understanding here, is that being told you don't deserve money might actually be the reason why you can't keep money, why money comes in, but it keeps going out and you keep finding yourself exactly in the same financial position year after year after year after year. And that could be the very reason. Now, if I can give you an insight, there was a lady that I worked with a number of years ago who the very reason she said to me, she said, I'm good at making money, but I'm terrible at keeping it. And I said, okay, let's start exploring that. What we discovered is she went to Greece with her family, and her father handed out money to her older brother. And then she immediately put her hand out, and he said, no, no, no. He said, now, by the way, this is totally inaccurate, wrong. He said, women are not good with money. And so that stuck with her. So she was really, really good at making money, but she was terrible at actually keeping it. And we did a huge amount of coaching around that. And I remember she said to me, she picked up a $600,000 piece of business after our coaching. And she today is a multi millionaire, and she can now keep money. So sometimes these things don't make sense until you actually get into the metacognition and you understand what is causing the behavior. So this is an example. This was a gentleman, Jurgen is his name, and he was on the same income over and over and over again. And I remember coaching him to help him to increase his income. And after coaching, he increased his income by over 100,000. So, we do have these limits in our thinking. And if you just look at your income, that's your limit. If you want to go beyond it, you've got to do the inner work. So, this particular lady, Marilyn is her name, she said, I believe no one would listen to me, but I was wrong. I built my first online course in just a few weeks. 1,902 people enrolled. I was gobsmacked that a grandmother could succeed online. It was her beliefs. It was her beliefs that she said, because I'm a grandmother, I can't succeed online. She now has over 70,000 people. That was the last time we chatted, but over 70,000 people in one of her courses. This guy said that I helped this guy to double his income, and all of it was based on his values. It was really his values that were limiting his income. And these values happened at a very, very young age. I won't go into his story because it was quite traumatic. Now, this particular gentleman, Hector is his name, he basically said, Rick's program helped me to more than double my income. I encourage my whole family to do it, and they have all benefited. What you learn inside this program is life changing. So, the thing is that the course that he's talking about is he came into our life coach and NLP practitioner course, and then he went on to masters. And so that's how he then doubled his income. He literally did it himself through his own awareness and learning. So the thing that we've got to understand is that sometimes we put limits on ourselves. So what I want you to do is, again, another quick exercise. I want you to go to page 15 in the notes and write down the first thing that springs to mind when you think of what do I need to detach from in 2026. So just let whatever comes out, whatever comes, flows out of your pen or your pencil, what is it that you need to detach from in 2026 to create a whole different world? So I'm just going to go quiet just for about another 5 or 6 seconds. So just the first thing that springs to mind. Okay. So the thing is here, what we have to understand is when your vision is clear and you know exactly what you are going for, what you've decided to create, and there's nothing stopping your path, then essentially that no glitter or distraction can pull you off your path when you're really, really clear. So today is what I've really been aiming to do is to help you get clearer, help you work out what do you need to accept, what do you need to detach from, and do you need to decide in order to create superlative outcomes. So Here is the only thing that I'm putting up as an opportunity for you today. And that is if you want some help, it's just really simple. Just scan the QR code, and then that will give you access into my diary. And I'm willing to help you to get some metacognition or help you to get clear on what you really want to create in your life or help you to accept what you need to accept in order to move forward in your life. And I'll give you up to an hour of my time. This is a one off. So if you want some help, I'll sit with you on a Zoom call. And essentially, what we'll do is we'll work out what needs to happen in your life to create what you ideally wish to create. So that's a QR code. So feel free to scan that. I'll make sure that I put the link in the chat as well. Now, where that'll take you to is it'll take you to my diary. This was my diary taken this morning. So as you can see, I've got times on the 19th, 20th, 24th to the 28th, and then even December. So the thing that I want to do in wrapping up here, I'm going to wish you all a wonderful, wonderful Christmas and a prosperous 2026. But I will open the chat should you have any questions before we wrap. I wanted to keep this fairly tight and keep it in an hour essentially. So I'm just going to, I'll come back to here. So if you want to then grab that QR code, feel free to do that now. And that will give you access into my diary and then you can make a time. So let's now open to chat. So, okay, so Don's saying, yeah, I don't see the bubble that has the link that you mentioned. Okay, what I will do is I will do this. And Trudy's saying, can I choose more than one thing for 2026? Absolutely. Of course you can. You can choose as many things as you want. So, so the thing that I'll actually do is I'll email you. I will send you that link so that you've got it in your email. So expect that a little time after we wrap up here. So the thing that I'm going to ask, does anybody have any questions about what I've covered today? You know, are there any questions about accept, detach, decide? Are there any questions about metacognition? Anything at all? You know, any questions? You're welcome, Kate, and you're welcome, Don. I'll make sure that I send those through to you. So any questions? Kate. Awesome, Gemma. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I'm glad that it was helpful. So, what I'm now going to do is the thing that I want to do is essentially wrap this up. So, basically, the thing that we have to understand in the context of really getting what you actually want from the future is you've got to look into the past because anything that you have done before more than likely is going to be easy for you unless there was a major trauma that happened somewhere in your life. But typically, anything that you've done before will be pretty easy to do. It's going to be the things that you haven't done before that are going to be harder. The things that you haven't done before are going to be things that you typically reach into your past and you can't see any evidence or strategy or proof that you've really been able to achieve that before. So then what happens is our body and our mind then go into how we are feeling. How am I feeling about creating that thing that I want in the future? And what typically happens when we don't see any evidence or we don't have any resources, our energy begins to drop. Our energy starts to go low because we think, oh, gee, it's going to be so hard to achieve that, or I've never achieved that before. And so what happens as a result is our low energy starts to create our neural programs and also sets a seed of incredible doubt. That sure, it'd be wonderful if I could achieve it, but in truth, I don't really see myself actually achieving it. So that's where the first thing that you need to do is get your energy up. You know, feel more positive, feel more prosperous, feel more in alignment with the goal that you actually want to achieve. So the thing that you have to understand is the reason that most people do not achieve their goals is that number one reason. Something's stopping me and I don't know what it is. So if that's you and you would like some help, jump into my diary and let's schedule it. And I'll ask you some questions to see whether we can get some really good clarity around what is actually stopping you. And if you haven't got any goals and you're thinking to yourself, I can't even think of any goals that I actually want, that's probably because for the same reasons. Something is stopping you in the past and it's causing you to not even dream anymore. But the truth is that with the right mindset, anything is possible. You really, really, truly can achieve absolutely anything. The thing that you've got to do is commit to your goals and remove anything that is stopping you from achieving those goals. So we have almost hit the 1 hour mark. So I'm going to wrap it now. So thank you everyone for jumping on. And I hope this has been incredibly helpful. I encourage you to get into your workbook and go through some of those questions and answer some of those questions to find out more. And a question I'm being asked is, could having fear of success be blocking you? Absolutely. Think about it in this way. Everything we do, everything we feel, everything we think actually has a positive intention. So a positive intention could be that if I'm successful, my positive intention is going to stop me from being successful because if I do that, I've got to be more and I'm scared of being more, or I'm going to be too busy, or or people are going to find out that I'm not good enough, whatever that might be. And another question is, what if I don't have any goals? Well, sadly, if you don't have any goals, your life is probably very stagnant and there's no surprises. And it just keeps being what it was yesterday is probably what it will be today and what it will be tomorrow. But the reason that you probably don't have any goals is probably because there's a lot of trauma in your past, or there's a lot of limiting beliefs and negative emotions that are probably causing you not to dream. Because again, it comes back to that point that your body always has positive intention. So there's always a positive intention. And even though you might not be getting what you want, chances are it's protecting you. It's protecting you from something that you think is going to be harmful or hurtful, or it's going to be too hard. So that's often why people don't have goals. So I hope I've answered that question as well. So, folks, thank you so much for rocking up today. And thank you for participating and for everyone that got into the chat and we were able to have a bit of a chat. So, thank you. It's always nice when that happens. And I hope to see you soon and have a wonderful, wonderful end of November, a beautiful December, and an amazing 2026. So thank you kindly. So see you all soon. Bye for now.